which is awesome. But at the same time, if you're not getting ahead, at some point that comes home to roost, right? And that is the depressing part. And then people who could have owned a home don't, because these little tiny
because he wasn't at home. He had to race back and pick up his kids before heading to his mother's house to get her.
A lot of people evacuating out of the place. They were heading out, which was good to see, because there's been a few false alarms in the past that have been, it's like the boy that cries wolf, but it was, anyway, people doing what they're supposed to do.
After some time, Mr Dillamore checked in with a local firefighter who confirmed the threat wasn't real. He says local authorities handled the unfolding situation as well as they could have.
I think it's better to have a warning than no warning at all. So the local volunteer service, they did a great job around here, and they were there to let people know what was going on, and they're just unreal.
Another local, Colin Smith, says he decided not to evacuate because of his amputation. His house overlooks the local fire station, and when Mr Smith couldn't see a huge commotion, he gathered it was probably a false alarm.
Having vision of the fire station, we knew that, because they do have the van there that goes out for those emergencies too, and that didn't go out, so we realised that it was probably not real.
And at what point did you, have it confirmed that it wasn't real? Did you get that, or was it just kind of...
just a personal belief that it wasn't real.
Fire and Emergency has apologised for the fault and says false alarms are not what they want. For Checkpoint, Katie Doyle.
The National Party reckons a burglary at its Auckland headquarters is a sinister start to election year. 3 laptops were taken from the office in Green Lane in the break-in, which was discovered this morning. Yet other goodies, like wine, were left behind. The police are now investigating. National Party MP Paul Goldsmith has an office in the same building. He explains what happened.
Well, the National Party team arrived this morning to find that a window had been jimmied open and 3 laptops stolen from a National Party room.
Only the laptops?
As far as we can see, yeah. I mean, there are other things that could have been taken by an opportunist criminal, but 3 laptops were taken only.
So what else? I mean, what else would you have thought that they would have taken if they were just going in there to grab everything that they could get?
Oh, well, there are bits and pieces around, bottles of wine and, other things that might have been of interest. So the point is that, we don't know what exactly has happened yet, but, laptops being taken at the start of an election year is frankly, disturbing and frankly sinister.
How so, do you think?
Well, we don't know exactly what's happened here, but, what we don't want to see is, laptops being stolen, things being broken into, and political parties being targeted. Now, it's early days yet, but that is our real concern.
So, do you suspect that this is someone wanting to get your party secrets? Was there election material on those computers?
Well, that's a distinct possibility. So we'll have to wait and see.
Is anything else happened that would lead you to think that this is something more than just a run-of-the-mill burglary, because there are tens of them every day, as you would know?
Indeed there are, and so, we've reported to the police. The police have come this morning. They'll be doing their work, and, of course, there are victims of crime all around the city. But, we're concerned at the start of an election year to have laptops taken. Nothing else of consequence taken is disturbing and sinister, but time will tell. We'll get to the bottom of it sooner or later.
What's on those laptops generally?
Oh, it's everything you'd expect from National Party staffers in an election year.
So a campaign strategy?
Who knows? I don't know exactly what's on them, but there's lots of material. The computers are fully encrypted. But you never know what's able to be accessed if it is part of some kind of well-organised hit. And so that's what we've got to be concerned about.
So just to be clear, obviously you have an office in that building, but it's in a separate area to the office that was burgled, yes?
That's right. It's the regional headquarters of the National Party organisation, the volunteer part of the organisation. I have an office on the other side of the building. They didn't go into that side of the building. They just went into the political party side of the office.
And is that building, the political party side of the office, as you put it, is it clearly marked? Is that?
No, you wouldn't know it ordinarily. No, it's all part of the same complex.
So do you think someone would have had to have known specifically where they were busting into there?
Well, that's a possibility, and that's why the incident is disturbing, and so we're very concerned about it.
Have you asked what was on the laptops?
Oh, look, I'm sure it'd be no surprises the sorts of things that was on a laptop. These are started in an election year, all sorts of material and stuff that should be well looked after.
Do you have CCTV at those offices?
I'm not aware that there is full CCTV right across the office, and certainly not in that area, but that's something that the police will be looking at. There are buildings adjacent to it, so I'm sure they'll be looking into all those elements.
Do you know at this stage if you have caught the people who broke in on camera?
No, I'm not aware of any of those details.
Okay.
Look, we just want to spend the election year talking about things that matters to New Zealanders. It's about flying economy, delivering on promises and so forth. And what worries us is if this is a signal about the sorts of politics that will be played this year. It's early days. I'm not making any accusations against anybody in particular, but to have 3 laptops stolen from our party offices in Auckland is disturbing.
Why does your brain go straight there, Paul, to thinking, this could be some kind of, undermining of us in election year? What makes you so suspicious?
The fact that a window's been opened in one part of the building, and the only thing that appears to have been removed is 3 laptops.
Laptops can be pretty valuable, though.
Sure, but, it's the start of an election year. It's a very unfortunate coincidence if it is.
So police investigating, are you doing any investigations of your own? When I say you, I mean the National Party. Are you going to get investigators in there?
Oh, well, I don't know about specific things. I mean, we've contacted the police. That's the obvious thing to do there. And then ultimately, because it's part of the party side of the building, it will be a matter for the party hierarchy to look at.
So no decision yet on whether you're going to do any investigations. The party is going to do any investigations of its own?
Yeah, not that I'm aware of yet.
So that was Paul Goldsmith, National Party MP, and he has an office inside that same building. It is 16 minutes after 5 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Keen for your feedback on anything you hear on the program this evening. You can text us on 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. What do you make of that burglary? Unfortunate coincidence, 3 laptops, the only things taken. Paul Goldsmith was saying there, do you regard that as sinister or just, another run-of-the-mill burglary? Let us know your thoughts. For the first time, Prince Harry has spoken publicly about his great sadness at being forced to give up his royal duties as part of an official exit deal. At the weekend, Buckingham Palace announced that Harry and Meghan will no longer be working members of Britain's monarchy and won't use their Royal Highness titles. The Duke and Duchess of Sussex plan to split their time between North America and the UK, and they aim to become financially independent. But details of how exactly they will do that are yet to be revealed. Speaking at a charity event, Prince Harry appeared to speak in defence of his wife and his decision to pull back from the royal family.
You've come to know me well enough over all these years to trust that the woman I chose as my wife upholds the same values as I do. And she does. And she's the same woman I fell in love with. We both do everything we can to fly the flag and carry out our roles for this country with pride. Once Meghan and I were married, we were excited, we were hopeful, and we were here to serve. For those reasons, it brings me great sadness that it has come to this. The decision that I have made for my wife and I to step back is not one I made lightly. It was so many months of talks after so many years of challenges. And I know I haven't always gotten it right, but as far as this goes, there really was no other option. What I want to make clear is we're not walking away, and we certainly aren't walking away from you. Our hope was to continue serving the Queen, the Commonwealth and my military associations, but without public funding. Unfortunately, that wasn't possible. I've accepted this, knowing that it doesn't change who I am or how committed I am. But I hope that helps you understand what it had come to, that I would step my family back from all I have ever known, to take a step forward into what I hope can be a more peaceful life. I was born into this life, and it is a great honour to serve my country and the Queen. When I lost my mum 23 years ago, you took me under your wing. You looked out for me for so long, but the media is a powerful force. And my hope is one day our collective support for each other can be more powerful, because this is so much bigger than just us. It has been our privilege to serve you, and we will continue to lead a life of service. So in that respect, nothing changes.
And that's Harry, the Duke of Sussex. Earlier I spoke to Richard Palmer from the Daily Express and asked him about Harry's speech.
The nub of it is that he and Meghan wanted to really have a halfway house and carry on serving the Queen without being publicly funded and without having some of the restrictions that other members of the royal family have in terms of earning a salary and things like that. And the Queen really wouldn't let that happen. And so he's talked about their sadness and disappointment, really, that they've had to give up that opportunity.
You talk about this kind of halfway house of withdrawing from royal life. I mean, how's it working in practical terms? What do you call him now? He's still got his title, he's just not going to use it, but they are still going to be the Duke and Duchess of Sussex. So how does that work?
Yeah, I mean, what we've been told is that, they will still be known as the Duke and Duchess of Sussex, but individually they won't be known as His or Her Royal Highness, and they'll be known as Harry, Duke of Sussex, and Meghan, Duchess of Sussex. It's not entirely clear whether that's something they volunteered or whether that's something that was forced upon them. I mean, I think it was sort of presented that they certainly agreed to it. I think that's been a difficult one to play for the Queen and the other senior members of the royal family, because when Diana was stripped of her HRH title and was no longer Princess of Wales, had to be called Diana, Princess of Wales, I think that rebounded very badly on the royal family, and so I think this time they were quite keen to stress that it was, the couple had agreed to that. But yes, they haven't been entirely stripped of it, so they can always come back at some point, I guess. I mean, this whole deal is up for review after a year, so there is still that opportunity, I guess, for everybody to say, okay, well, it's been an experiment and hasn't worked that well, and perhaps they'll come back. But having said that, it doesn't sound that likely at the moment.
In terms of splitting his time between Canada and the UK, he mentioned in this speech that the UK is his home and it always will be. But do you know anything about his, for example, immigration status? Can he live freely in Canada for the amount of time he wants to, or will he be given special treatment?
My understanding is he can live up to 6 months in Canada without needing, just as a British visitor. The honest answer is I don't know what they're going to do on that score, because they have said that they're going to spend the majority of their time in North America. So they may need to look at their immigration status there. And that also has implications for Meghan over here as well, because as I'm sure you know, she is going through a long 5-year process of trying to become a British citizen.
What do average everyday punters make of all of this?
I think young people are more sympathetic towards Harry and Meghan. Clearly people of colour, not everybody, but a lot of them see Meghan as a standard bearer, and I think it's a great shame, because that was one of the things that they've been able to do, is attract people to the monarchy and let the monarchy give them a voice for the first time, really, and they're going to the royal family is going to lose that to a large degree, I suspect. because Harry and Meghan won't be doing those Commonwealth tours on behalf of the Queen, and they won't be doing lots of engagements in our inner cities where there are big populations of people of ethnic minorities. So, I mean, they will carry on doing their charity work in this country, so we will still see them. It's not clear whether we're going to see Meghan do another official engagement on behalf of the Queen before this deal all comes into place in spring 2020. Last night it very much sounded as if she probably won't be doing any more. But then on the other hand, I think they've lost Middle England, this couple. They have alienated a lot of older, more traditionalist supporters of the monarchy. You know, the monarchy has a mission statement on the royal family's official website that talks about acting as a force for national unity, continuity and stability. And I think the monarchy is always changing, but the idea is to change imperceptibly. And I think one of the mistakes that Harry and Meghan have made is that they have tried to be a voice for more radical change.
Thomas Markle, Meghan's father, I mean, snippets of an interview that is about to play sometime soon are circulating. What is he saying about his daughter? I think he's talked about them being lost souls, and he's no nearer any sort of reconciliation with his daughter. I mean, in fact, it's looking as if he's going to be appearing as a star witness in a court case against his daughter. He looks as if he's appearing on behalf of the Mail on Sunday newspaper, which she's suing essentially for breach of privacy, for using one of her letters to him. And that promises to be a sensational court case. You know, if they both get into the witness box. You know, at the moment it's hard to see how Meghan can avoid being called into the witness box. Although our courts traditionally have been quite protective of the royal family, so I don't know how that will play out. Again, personally, I think that it's a huge mistake they've made. I mean, in not rebuilding bridges with Thomas Markle, because he's out there again now. Yeah, he's appearing in a Channel 5 documentary. He's been talking to other newspapers, and he's just going to be a constant thorn in their side. So that was Richard Palmer from the Daily Express. Now, let us know what you make of that, whether you think it's possible for the Duke and Duchess of Sussex to have financial independence from the royal family, and what you make of their exit from official duties. You can text us 2101. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ or flick us an email, checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Let's head to Australia now, where a huge dust storm has swept through the Australian city of Dubbo with a cloud thousands of metres high, causing damage to a school and local businesses. Dramatic footage, and it is dramatic, shows this wall of dust bombarding the city before moving on to the Central Ranges. Somewhat cruelly, local residents initially thought the huge cloud might have been bringing rain relief. ABC reporter Lucy Thackeray is in Dubbo, where they've been getting about 4 dust storms a week during the unrelenting drought.
This one was just particularly dramatic. What happened was it looked like rain in the distance because it was kind of blue to start off with, and so everybody was watching thinking, are we getting rain? And it comes towards you like a wave, this big cloud, and it became red, and it comes closer and closer, and you can see it from a distance, as people might have seen in the photos which are around on social media, and then you watch it come towards you, and then the winds pick up, and then before you know it, you're in the middle of this storm. And so you're tasting dust. It's up your nose, it's in your ears, it's everywhere. Everything goes red. And then as it rushes over you, it blocks out the sun, and it's just pitch black. And so there's actually a difference between 2 photos. One was taken at 5:30 p.m. and it's red, and then 2 minutes later it's pitch black like it's nighttime. And when it actually passes, you've got the daylight coming through again, and it's, back to normal. It passes like a wave.
Yeah, because looking at the pictures, it looks like the dust is actually moving along the ground, as you say, and it looks like, how tall would you estimate that is?
Thousands of metres. So tall. It's someone actually put up a photo from 30,000 feet in the air on a plane, and they could see it just below them. And it goes from the ground right up to the top. And it does move like a wave in the sense that it comes from the west, it hits a town, it passes through, and then when it's passed, it lasts about 5-10 minutes. It depends how much dust is there and how high the winds are, and then it moves on and goes to the next town. So what they're actually expecting is that's moving to the northeast now. Dubbo's right in the middle of the state of New South Wales, and so it's right in the middle there, and it's moving to the northeast towards the coast with less power because it's been going so long and there's less wind to pick it up. But at its peak, there were winds of around 107 kilometres an hour, and so that's what was really pushing it through.
Are there any concerns about health risks and damage?
Absolutely. So these have been coming very frequently, and as people are coping with the drought, these are ongoing issues. It's really difficult for asthmatics because those tiny little particles which come through, they just get into your system, and so that's really difficult. And as well, a local school, one of their roofs has caved in, and so it typically the only damage it does is leaving dust absolutely everywhere, and it gets under doorways and into houses, and people are just saying that they're cleaning their houses all the time and just this red dust is all over everything. But in the case of this storm, because it was so fierce, it has actually, knocked into some buildings and done some damage.
Oh, people over there must be feeling like they can't get a break at the moment.
Absolutely. So Dubbo and the western region of New South Wales, fortunately it has been spared by those fires, but that's only because there's been nothing to burn out here. So that's the reason why when it's been going all over the rest of the state, the one thing that, was a positive to having this relentless drought which is going on through here is the fact that there was nothing to burn. So we're really the part of the state which hasn't suffered, while the rest has just been, victim to this terrible fire. So I work in Dubbo, but I've been working on the coast for the last 4 months, and I thought how wonderful I'll get to go to the beach and have a break from this dust and have a break from, these dust storms which come through and are just so exhausting. And then I went to the coast and it's smoke in the air instead. And so it's just really difficult to find anywhere in Australia at the moment where you can have clear blue skies and easy to breathe air.
And that was Lucy Thackeray from the ABC there. We're just talking about the fact that those pictures are absolutely remarkable. If you haven't seen them, do go online and check them out. Just the sheer scale of it is, wow, it's mind-blowing. Meanwhile, Australia's New South Wales government is about to conduct the largest ever cull of feral animals in response to this year's devastating bushfires. Scientists estimate that the blazes have killed more than 1 billion animals across the country, and there's concern that the wildlife that has survived is now more vulnerable than ever due to feral predators. The ABC's Sarah Sedgey reports.
Like most Australians, Jess Abrahams has found it hard to see the scale of destruction caused by this year's unprecedented bushfire season.
It's been very upsetting, and I think it's upsetting for everyone, whether it's the human toll or the toll on the environment.
The nature campaigner for the Australian Conservation Foundation is extremely worried about the impact on wildlife.
The threatened species have been heavily impacted by this fire. Certainly in New South Wales, we know the brush-tailed rock wallaby habitat has been burnt, and they're in trouble. But in Victoria as well, the vulnerable greater glider has had 25% of its habitat burned.
It's estimated more than 1 billion animals died in the fires, and those that have survived are more vulnerable than ever, especially to feral species such as foxes and cats. To minimise the harm, the New South Wales government is currently planning the largest feral animal cull in the state's history. To Jess Abrahams, it's an important step in protecting animals.
The habitat has been damaged, and wildlife literally don't have a place to hide. And cats and foxes in particular can have a big impact right now animals that are really struggling to eat, to find water if they need, and to have habitat to hide in.
Dr. Thomas Newsom is from the University of Sydney School of Life and Environment Sciences. While he welcomes the plans to cull predators, he says a lot more needs to be done to protect Australia's wildlife.
Our wildlife already face severe threats from predation, habitat loss, altered fire regimes, a changing climate. Australia, unfortunately, has a pretty bad track record when it comes to conserving its wildlife, particularly mammals. We have the highest extinction rate in the world for mammals, and these fire events really have the potential to tip these remaining species over an edge and into literally an extinction vortex.
Last week, the federal government committed $50 million to rescue and protect wildlife affected by the fires and says that's just an initial investment. The government is also working with wildlife experts and environment groups in the response. Jess Abrahams from the Australian Conservation Foundation says if everyone acts with urgency, Australia's wildlife can be better protected.
There is still hope that if we do make the right investments, we do have strong laws, we do protect the best of what's left, we can ensure that we have wildlife and natural environments into the future.
Environmentalists might be praising the politician who made the animal cull announcement, New South Wales Environment Minister Matt Keane. But the Prime Minister doesn't seem such a fan, telling the AM program this morning that his state colleague doesn't know anything about carbon emissions and is virtually a nobody in the minds of the federal cabinet. But Matt Keane appears focused on the task of ridding the state of predators of the animal variety.
The main priority now will be eradicating feral pests who are preying on our native animals. We will roll out the biggest feral pest eradication program in our state's history.
And that's the New South Wales Environment Minister ending that report from the ABC. And coming up on Checkpoint on RNZ National, runaway house prices. They're still on the up, so how can people get a foot on the property ladder in 2020? Kiwi firefighters return from the bushfire disaster in Australia and knocking off work early on a Friday. Vodafone's doing it, so should others too. We'd love your feedback. Get in touch about that one particularly. Text us on 2101. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. But let's go now to the headlines with Susanna.
A car seat may have saved a child caught up in a shooting in Napier yesterday. A 25-year-old man is in a serious but stable condition in Hawke's Bay Hospital with injuries to his head, face and torso. The police say a pellet hit the back of the car seat, but the child was unharmed. A new respiratory virus has spread to Beijing and Shenzhen from the central Chinese city of Wuhan, where it was first identified. The number of confirmed cases in Wuhan trebled over the weekend to nearly 200, and 3 people have now died there. Fire and Emergency says a false tsunami alarm which panicked people in Western Bay of Plenty last night may have been due to human error. Spokesperson Kerry Gregory says the warning came through a disused IT system, but it's still not clear what activated it. He says they have put patches in place in the IT system to make sure the alarm isn't accidentally set off elsewhere. The National Party is describing the theft of laptops from their Auckland headquarters at the weekend as sinister. MP Paul Goldsmith has told Checkpoint that coming at the start of the election year, the burglary was disturbing. He says it's possible the thieves were trying to get hold of election material and party secrets. Vodafone is giving its employees an extra incentive to get through their work early during summer. Starting this Friday, it's going to let them leave at 2 o'clock on Friday afternoons if they get their work done in time. The company says it's a chance to reward workers and give them a break. A Christchurch nurse is outraged her pay for extra work over Christmas and New Year won't come through until the end of February. Her union has written to the Canterbury District Health Board about the late processing of pay to at least 1,500 nurses. Union organiser Ron Angel says the board has failed to comply with the Wages Protection Act. Those are the latest news headlines from RNZ National. Our next news and weather update is at 6.
Thanks, Susanna. This is Checkpoint. If you're just tuning in, it is time for the business news now with Madison Reedy. Maddie, this utility software company Gentrack is facing a few challenges. What's going on with them?
Yeah, Gentrack sales seem to be suffering at the minute, and that's due to difficult market conditions that it's experiencing in its key markets. It's facing increased competition. It's also suffering the loss of a major customer and regulatory price caps, which were introduced in the electricity markets in both Australia and Britain. So as a result, Gentrack said to the market today that it expects a significant drop in its revenue for the year to September. It also expects its operating earnings to be slashed by more than half. It says it expects its operating earnings to come in for the full year at between $8 and $12 million. Now, that would be up to 68% lower than its previous year operating earnings of $25 million, of which that figure was already 20% lower than the year before that. Although the company does say that it's implementing a cost-cutting strategy, so it plans to cut $8 million of costs out of its business, half of that this financial year. It's also going to change up its business model a bit. It's going to go from selling software licenses, which are one-time sales, to selling software as a service, which is expected to help improve and grow revenue. After all that, though, Gentrack did want to tell and remind the market that it is a profitable business, that it has no debt and that it has a strong balance sheet. But regardless, investors did not like this news today. Its share price fell 13.6% to $2.35 on the NZX.
Okay, so it's the start of the year and there's some economic data, important economic data that we're expecting to get this week. What are we kicking the year off with?
Yeah, this is the inflation data. So this comes in the form of the Consumers Price Index. Inflation is essentially the increasing cost of products that consumers can buy in the New Zealand market and the supply of money that's available to buy them. Essentially, it's a measure of the economy's momentum and how it's progressing. It has become a bit of a pain for the Reserve Bank in New Zealand and also central banks around the world, though, because ever since the global financial crisis, inflation has been running pretty low globally. Expectations for this Consumers Price Index, which will be for the December quarter, so finishing up the 2019 economic year, expectations are for a 0.4% quarterly rise, which would take annual inflation up to 1.8% from 1.5%. And that's expected because of increased prices for things like housing, rent in particular, and also transport costs too. Now, if that result does ring true and we do get what economists are expecting, that would bring inflation closer to the Reserve Bank of New Zealand's preferred midpoint target of near 2%. And that would mean that they would feel pretty comfortable about sitting on these historically low interest rates that we have at the moment, and they wouldn't be in too much of a rush to cut the official cash rate.
Hey, what else has been happening on the markets today?
The NZX Top 50 Index actually closed down 0.5% today. That's after 3 consecutive record highs last week, so it fell 53 points today to close at 11,746. The New Zealand dollar, that's buying at 66.2 US cents, 96.2 to the Australian, and 50.2 British pence.
Thanks, Maddie. Madison Reedy with our business news. And speaking of inflation there, red tape, inflated land prices, rock-bottom interest rates, migration and speculation are fueling New Zealand's runaway property market. The 16th annual Demographia International Housing Affordability Survey, released today, ranks all 8 markets in New Zealand as severely unaffordable. So, what are the solutions? Ruth Hill asks the experts.
House prices, the national obsession. Either you're feeling smug right now because you managed to buy years ago, or you're drowning in debt from that massive mortgage, or you're in deep despair because house prices are rising faster than you can save for a deposit. Wellington IT professional Chris McKenzie is 32, single, earns good money and has saved a decent deposit. But he expects he would struggle to pay a mortgage alone, which is why he's considering more creative ways of getting into the market, such as a group purchase.
It really looks like one of the better ways of getting a mortgage paid off would be to, for a person on single income, to share that with other people on single incomes. Granted, there's a number of risks. If one person can't pay, then you've got to plan for that.
But why are New Zealand houses so expensive? Co-author of the Demographia report, Hugh Pavlidge, blames inflated land prices due to planning restrictions.
There's about 400,000 a hectare of just artificial planning value on the fringes of Rolleston, probably about 1 million on the fringe of Christchurch, and probably about 3 odd million on the fringes of Auckland plus. of just artificial scarcity values.
He's optimistic that legislation currently before Parliament to relax planning rules and fund infrastructure will make housing more affordable in future. But he says local councils should be making more land available now.
It was only a few years ago you couldn't give houses away in Dunedin, and they should just about fire the council down there and put in commissioners. And do that while they're on the job, do the same for Tauranga and Wellington as well. This has gone on for so long, and these people have been looking at this problem and have been completely irresponsible and not reacting to it.
Economist Shemabil Yacob agrees more flexible planning rules and financing for infrastructure are needed so more houses can be built. But he says simply freeing up land won't fix the housing crisis for the most vulnerable.
If there's something the government can do immediately, I think it's massively increasing our supply of public housing, because there is a real and urgent need that cannot be solved any other way.
Fellow economist Nick Goodall from CoreLogic says houses are actually more affordable than they were 3 years ago by some measures, including the share of income needed for mortgage payments. That's due to the fall in interest rates, which also allows people to borrow more. Mr Goodall says investors grabbed more than 1 in 4 properties in October, beating out first home buyers who had a 24% market share.
Talk about a more comprehensive capital gains tax from the government got ruled out. And so seeing those investors gain a bit more confidence and come back into the market in the latter half of last year.
The Property Investors Federation Chief Executive Andrew King doesn't believe investors are pushing first home buyers out of the market.
Only 7% of the population actually own rental property. The numbers have to work, and at the moment it's really quite difficult to actually make rental property work.
Mr King says it's pressure from migration driving house prices. He says it's always been difficult to get on the property ladder, but for different reasons. He had to get a second job to afford the interest on his first home.
It will mean hardship, though. I mean, there's just no way around it. If you want to own your own property, you have to forego other things, and you have to save a lot of your income in order to get that deposit.
Mr King's season advice to first home buyers is don't give up. For Checkpoint, Ruth Hill.
Telecommunications company Vodafone is giving its more than 2,000 workers an extra incentive to finish the summer weeks early. It's announced it will let employees leave at 2 o'clock, yep, you heard right, 2 o'clock on Friday afternoons. Jonathan Mitchell reports.
People in Wellington were out enjoying anniversary day in the sun this afternoon, and the temptation of an early knock-off on a Friday got them excited.
I think it would make me, more productive having a shorter working week, but, more effective during the days I am working. Less stress from work, and, if it's a shorter week, maybe a bit more pay would be nice, so you wouldn't be stressing about that as much.
I don't think people are very productive during the week anyway, and if you shorten it down a little bit and concentrate it, you can get increased productivity.
And do you think there'd be more incentive for you to work harder through the week if you knew that was coming?
Yeah, I want to get more done on the Friday morning for sure, yeah.
Good idea. I reckon we need to be home more instead of bloody work. More time with the kids, more time at home.
Vodafone's acting HR director, Katie Williams, says it's a chance to give its workers a break.
For us, it's about making sure that our people have the best work-home balance they can have. And given the weather is so fantastic at the moment, we wanted to celebrate the New Zealand summer by giving our people a chance to go home early on Friday afternoons, to either go to the beach early, spend time with their family, or just simply sit in the sun and enjoy themselves.
She says if work still needs to be done, employees can take another day off another time. And she thinks it will have wider benefits to the company.
1, it attracts people to join us. 2, it helps retain our great people and make sure that they want to stay with us. And lastly, it gives people the well-earned rest that they require. So when they are working, they are doing the very best job they can.
Perpetual Guardian helps people with wills, trusts and estate planning. It went to a 4-day working week permanently over a year ago. So far, about 75% of its 240 employees are working shorter weeks. The company's founder, Andrew Barnes, says it's an important step in creating a healthier and happier workplace.
Well, there has been absolutely no negative impact in terms of our productivity. Our customer service standards haven't declined, but obviously our staff are healthier, happier, and obviously more engaged in terms of what they do with the company.
He says it has had material benefits as well.
We are seeing a lower sick leave balance, and also we're starting to see trending down in staff turnover. the real issue here is it takes a little bit longer than, a year and a bit to get those long-term trends. But clearly, if people have got better chance to rest, make themselves fit, to recharge the batteries, they're likely to not have as much days off sick.
Vodafone says the early Friday knock-off will be in place from this Friday until the 28th of February. For Checkpoint's Court Jonathan Mitchell, 10A.
It's about 11 minutes from 6. I know you will have something to say about that, so do get in touch. You can text us on 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. As you heard there, Vodafone, it's over the next 6 weeks, I think, if you add them up. They're going to let their workers go home at 2 o'clock on a Friday. Good idea or not? And what about those jobs where it's not possible? If you're rostered on as a nurse or you might be a teacher, can't just pack up and leave work. So how do you compensate those people? Let us know your thoughts. You can flick us an email at checkpointrnz.co.nz. And a deal has been struck between world leaders in Berlin to try to bring peace to Libya after 9 years of conflict. Led by the German Chancellor Angela Merkel, the countries including Turkey and Russia have pledged not to interfere in Libya and to uphold a UN arms embargo. Libya's been torn apart by fighting and instability since the country's dictator Muammar Gaddafi was killed in 2011. And last year, the conflict intensified between militias loyal to the UN-backed government of Fayez al-Sarraj and those fighting for General Khalifa Haftar. The BBC's Jenny Hill reports.
Volatile, complex, Libya's at war with itself. Two factions backed by foreign powers as they wrestle for control of this oil-rich land. Today, world leaders arrived in Berlin to seek a solution. Many of the countries represented at the table have sent troops, weapons, money to both sides, despite a UN weapons embargo. Today, they agreed to stop.
I am under no illusion that we have a difficult road ahead of us. And in Libya at the moment, emotions are running high. But we agreed that in light of all the suffering that is happening, and in light of the terrible situation, that it is worth it.
Outside the meeting, supporters of both Libya's internationally recognised Prime Minister and his warlord rival. No truce today, but delegates hope an end to foreign interference might be a first step. They're fuelled by fear that they can no longer rely on Libyan oil supplies, that the instability will inflame Islamist terror in the region, and for Europe's governments, that more and more people will seek refuge in their countries. Libya, known as a gateway to Europe, already hosts hundreds of thousands of migrants. For Libya, some respite. A ceasefire has held for several days now. The so-called Berlin process doesn't guarantee it, nor does it mean the removal of existing foreign troops and weapons, and it's unclear how or even whether the agreement will be monitored or enforced. But in it, some see the beginning, perhaps, of a long and difficult road to peace.
The BBC's Jenny Hill reporting. Dozens of people have been injured in the Lebanese capital Beirut during a second night of violent clashes between anti-government protesters and security forces. In all, more than 400 people have been hurt over the weekend. The BBC's Arab Affairs editor, Sebastian Usher, has this report.
The centre of the Lebanese capital has again been convulsed by a confrontation between protesters and the security forces the day after the worst violence since the demonstrations started back in October. The image of peaceful protest bringing together all sections of Lebanese society with women at the forefront, which had been celebrated as a sign of hope both inside and outside Lebanon, for several hours turned into a riot. Mainly young men threw stones, some torn from the cladding of luxury buildings, at the security forces, which responded with water cannon and then tear gas and, according to eyewitnesses, rubber bullets. President Aoun is to hold a security meeting to discuss how to stop the violence. But the protesters say they've had enough of the entire political class, which, they say, has failed to act on their desperate calls for change.
The BBC's Sebastian Usher. The issue of climate change is set to dominate this year's World Economic Forum at Davos in Switzerland. Now, in its 50th year, the annual gathering of 3,000 of the world's richest and most powerful people has often been derided by its critics as elitist and out of touch. But this year, organisers are telling delegates that a new approach is needed to tackle the problem of global warming, warning that the cost of inaction will far exceed the cost of action. The ABC's Nick Grime reports.
Protesters setting out to hike cross-country to the Swiss ski resort town that will host this week's gathering of the world's government and business elite. Some dressing as Australian koalas to remind delegates of the bushfire emergency still unfolding half a world away from the snowy surrounds of Davos.
If this is the World Economic Forum and it's the global economy that's eroding our ecosystem away from underneath our own feet, then we need to address that issue there.
This year, though, it won't just be protesters hammering out the sustainability message. The WEF itself has jumped on board. Conference organisers giving the gathering the theme, Stakeholders for a Cohesive and Sustainable World. And last week it launched its annual Global Risks Report ahead of the Davos gathering. Here's WEF President Borge Brende.
For the first time in 15 years in our risk report, when we look at the 10 years outlook, climate change and environmental risks are 5 out of 5 when it comes to likeliness in the report.
To the world leaders and those in power, I would like to say that you haven't seen anything yet.
Joining those assembling at Davos, climate activist Greta Thunberg. The Swedish teenager has been invited to open a debate tomorrow on how the world can avert climate disaster. World Economic Forum founder Klaus Schwab says that's now the biggest issue facing the world and the global economy.
Now we are faced with an urgency. We see a window for action closing. And that's the reason why we put so much emphasis on the issue of climate during this 50th anniversary.
Delegates have also been promised a special address by US President Donald Trump. It remains to be seen if he'll tackle the subject of climate change or focus on other issues facing the world economy.
And the top billing is not Trump, but Greta Thunberg. So we'll see how much they're prepared to embrace the magnitude of the challenge through to 2050.
But Australia's former Liberal Party leader John Hewson hopes the summit can leverage world leaders to do more to tackle climate change.
You'd hope so. I mean, you can't keep denying the undeniable. And they've obfuscated on these issues now for quite some time, governments and business. And stop playing short-term politics. We're talking about 3 decades strategic planning, not short-term politics.
And that's the former Liberal Party leader John Hewson ending that report from the ABC's Nick Grime. Sticking with the climate change theme, a group of Argentinian students have designed a special drone to help keep the planet clean. The pollution monitoring machine goes one further as it's made from recycled materials. Ash Rowe reports.
This is the Cannon, an aquatic drone invented by a group of teen scientists in Argentina. Although it may look a little rough around the edges at first glance, this contraption is designed to monitor pollution levels. The students came up with the idea when their teacher complained that the water on the local beach was staining his wetsuit after windsurfing. Yasimel Cabello and Augusta Mayoko are two of the young inventors.
We realised that taking samples from 13 square kilometres was unfeasible because it was too much to cover. A lot of data like temperature is lost when it's taken into the laboratory. We agreed on a project where the information is not stored, doesn't need to be taken into a lab, even if it's basic information. So we created the Cannon. It can measure pH, salinity, depth and temperature, and you can change the sensors according to the situation.
el gusto de cada persona.
In the programming, design and construction, it was trial and error from the beginning. As it's a device that is unique and which was created by us, we couldn't just get internet data from something that was already done.
Resources are stretched at the public school where the students built the cannon, so they had to get creative. Many of the drone's parts come from recycled materials. The device has already been showcased in a few local science fairs and will be presented at an international convention in Mexico.
And that was Ash Rowe reporting. Some time for your feedback just before 6 on the burglary at National Party HQ in Auckland. National Party says it's suspicious and sinister in election year. A lot of you say, hey, no, it's just a burglary. Glenda's got in touch to say, I would say random, as where I work is next door to the National Office, and we had our office broken into. All they took were laptops and not the wine. Murray says, so they have had their laptops encrypted. There'll be no problem. I would note that laptops are a thieving commodity, he says. And Chris has got in touch to say, with the SFO investigation approaching its conclusion, I too find the timing of the break-in suspicious. Can you ask Mr Goldsmith whether there were any details pertaining to political donations on those laptops? And this one from Angus, just a simple burglary. Angus says, where they could be sure of getting laptops, and just a case of National making political capital out of something small. A lot of you getting in touch about that. Most of you think it's just a random burglary. This one says, our office was burgled last year, only the laptops taken, many other valuables ignored, and the police reckon it was gamers who get about $100 each for the computers. On the Royals, a lot of opinions on Harry and Meghan. This person says it appears that Harry and Meghan will exchange the royal paparazzi for the celeb variety. They won't escape the public gaze, says Jim. And a lot of you are saying that no mention of the persecution that Meghan and Harry have experienced from the tabloid media in the UK.
RNZ News at 6, ngā mihi nui ko Susana Leatawa tēnei. Fire and Emergency says people should not be deterred from taking emergency sirens seriously, despite a false alarm in Western Bay of Plenty last night. Sirens sounded from Waihi to Te Puke had people scrambling to evacuate, many mistakenly believing a tsunami was on the way. Fire and Emergency spokesperson Kerry Gregory says the false alarm was put out by an old IT system. He says the public shouldn't be discouraged by the incident.
Well, that is always a worry for all of us in the emergency sector. And, what I wanted to say to people is, have the confidence that we'll get our systems right here. And if there is a siren, I want you to evacuate. I certainly want you to evacuate so that you know that you're safe.
Kerry Gregory says they're trying to find out what activated the old IT system. Disability advocates say the government's overhaul of funded family care has failed to fix some of the most critical problems. More details of when the long-anticipated changes will take effect were announced yesterday. Family carers will be paid more from mid-April, and carer eligibility is being expanded to partners and younger family members. But the Disability Rights Commissioner, Paula Tesoreo, says the method of calculating the hours people are paid for needs to be simplified.
Many families and disabled people talk about the assessment process being very complex, and that's something that the courts have previously commented on as well. So I'd like to see the assessment process itself be much easier for disabled people and their families.
The Disability Rights Commissioner, Paula Tesoriero. South Korea has confirmed its first case of the new coronavirus that has broken out in China. The patient is a 35-year-old Chinese woman who flew from the Chinese city of Wuhan to Incheon International Airport yesterday. She was isolated upon entry because of symptoms such as high fever. Chinese authorities earlier confirmed the coronavirus infection first identified in Wuhan has spread to Beijing and Shenzhen, each of which have recorded one case. In Wuhan itself, the number of confirmed cases trebled over the weekend to nearly 200, and a third person has died there. An Ashburton father has made it his mission to make the road where his daughters lost their lives much safer. 16-year-old Sunmara Alexander died in hospital from her injuries last month, 2 weeks after her 17-year-old sister Taylor died. The car they were in plunged down a bank on Summit Road in Christchurch's Port Hills in November. More than 6,000 people have signed a petition launched by Jason Alexander calling for sturdier barriers and controlled entry to prevent boy racers. He will be taking the petition to the Christchurch City Council later this week. A new report reveals it now costs 7 times the median wage to buy a house, up from 6.5 times a year earlier. The 16th annual Demographia International Housing Affordability Survey, released today, ranks all 8 regional markets in New Zealand as severely unaffordable. However, economist Nick Goodall from CoreLogic says that by some measures, houses are actually more affordable than they were 3 years ago.
We also look at the share of income required for repayments of a mortgage, and that at the moment is sitting at about 32%, which is down from 39% in Q4 2016. So really reflecting the fact that interest rates have dropped over the last couple of years.
Nick Goodall of CoreLogic. The Tasman District Council is poised to introduce water cuts as dry weather starts to take hold. Its Dry Weather Task Force will meet tomorrow to assess the situation. Spokesperson Dennis Bush-King says conditions are set to worsen because no rain is forecast for the next 2 weeks. He says it's likely water restrictions will be introduced during that time, and it might be sooner for some consent holders in parts of the district. It's 4 minutes past 6. Swiss tennis star Roger Federer set a record for the most Australian Open men's singles appearances today when he played his first competitive match since November. In his opening match of the tournament, Federer was leading 4-1 in the first set against American Steve Johnson when rain suspended play. When the players returned to the court, Federer had little trouble wrapping up the match 6-3, 6-2, 6-2. The 7-time Australian Open women's champion Serena Williams beat Russia's Anastasia Potapova 6-love, 6-3 in 58 minutes to move through to the second round in her 19th campaign at Melbourne Park. In the opening game on centre court, defending champion Naomi Osaka overcame a patchy and error-prone performance to beat Marie Buskova of the Czech Republic 6-2, 6-4. The women's top seed Australian Ash Barty opens the night session on Rod Laver Arena. The home crowd are backing the 23-year-old world number 1 to become the first Australian woman to win the season opening Grand Slam since Chris O'Connell in 1978.
There's no extra pressure. I don't read the papers. I don't kind of look into any more than I need to. I'm here with my team trying to do the best that we can. And, you know, it's amazing to have so much support and so much love from the Australian public.
Ash Barty. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights, well, we're back for a start, kicking off the year with Federated Mountain Clubs and its search for the best photo of a mountain in Aotearoa. There's some pretty good entries, some of which are up on the website. Dana Johansson looks back on the summer's sport so far. It can only get better. And we've got a new music segment, One for the Road, songs that accompany folk on that long road trip through the night. So join me, Brian Crump, after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight tomorrow. Northland fine apart from isolated showers inland during the afternoon. Auckland to Kapiti Coast including Coromandel, Bay of Plenty and Central High Country. Fine weather, however some morning cloud with patchy drizzle for Taranaki. Gisborne, Hawke's Bay and Wairarapa mostly cloudy with patchy drizzle, however light showers north of Hastings gradually easing. For Wellington, fine apart from areas of morning cloud. For the whole of the South Island, mostly fine. Areas of cloud morning and night, mainly near the coast with the odd patch of drizzle. Isolated showers for inland Otago and Southland during the afternoon and evening. Chatham Islands mostly cloudy, some afternoon fine spells. RNZ National, it's coming up to 7 minutes past 6.
Thanks, Susanna. If you're just tuning in, this is Checkpoint and I'm Lisa Owen. A temporary fix has been put in place to stop any more false tsunami sirens after accidental alarms caused evacuations across Western Bay of Plenty. Sirens sounded from Tauranga to Waihi around 9:15 last night, with many people believing they were a tsunami warning. Fire and Emergency New Zealand says the alert was due to an issue do with a legacy system, and patches have been put in place to ensure there are no more alarms. National Commander Kerry Gregory says they're still trying to get to the bottom of the technical problem which caused the alarms, but today told the media they don't believe the system was hacked.
What we've uncovered today is, the system as such. Some of them sat within some of the surf lifesaving clubs. Some of them sat within Fire and Emergency New Zealand. My understanding was the racetrack at Bay Park had a siren there. And there's some of the ones that sat on fire stations weren't necessarily ours, but the things. So it's a complex arrangement of sirens that set up a system, but it is that particular one was a legacy system, like I say, that is retired, and it's not actually the active system in place. It was a system that's been in place since probably around 2006. Okay, and as different groups have amalgamated and different organisations have come together, the system sat there, but people had, to a certain degree, forgotten the system was activated. So when it was activated, and it wasn't activated through Fire Emergency New Zealand, it was activated through other means, and that's what we have to work out is how has it been activated, so that can't happen again. It went and people obviously evacuated thinking it was a tsunami as such. I think people need to understand that we're taking this very seriously, and we're working to find out what's the technical fix. It's I can say to you all sorts of things, but unless we actually know the detail that sits behind, what set this off technically, then we're not going to be able to put a long-term fix in place. So we've put a patch in place today, so that this can't happen today, but we need to understand the detail so that we can work through that with all our partner organisations to make sure we've got a system that works.
And that's Kerry Gregory, National Commander for Fire and Emergency New Zealand. Parents and disability advocates say they're disappointed the government's overhaul of funded family care doesn't go far enough to fix some of the most critical problems in the system. The changes have been in the works for some time, and more details about when they will come into effect were announced yesterday. Among them, family members looking after disabled loved ones will be paid more from mid-April, and carer eligibility is being expanded so spouses and partners and younger family members can be paid for the work they do. But the assessment process, which calculates how many hours they are paid for, remains untouched. Our reporter Sarah Robson has more.
Lawyer Paul Dale QC has represented a number of parents seeking a fairer deal for the work they do caring for their disabled children. He says while the reforms are a step in the right direction, some families will be no better off if changes aren't made to the assessment process, which is used to work out how many hours a week carers will be paid for.
They work through a chart which has things like the number of hours or number of minutes spent going to the bathroom and toileting and hygiene and meal preparation and feeding and so forth.
In a case Paul Dale is working on at the moment, that assessment has calculated that a family carer will be paid for 15 hours work a week.
I've met the particular boy involved, and the notion that he could be cared for 15 hours in a week is just absurd.
Paul Dale says while some changes are better than no changes, families caring for high-needs disabled loved ones are doing it tough.
Those that are blessed with a healthy family don't understand, I think, how onerous it is, but it's tough. It really is not something that should be measured as a matter of minutes and hours and the kind of artificial approach that's being adopted.
Peter Humphreys cares for his 31-year-old daughter full-time, and he says a tick-box exercise really doesn't represent the amount of work many carers do. He says the assessment process can also throw up inconsistencies.
Such a variation in assessments throughout the country. There's no uniform, doesn't seem to be a uniform assessment system or allocation system.
The Disability Rights Commissioner, Paula Tesoriero, says families of disabled people complain that the assessment process is too complex.
I'd like to see the assessment process itself be much easier for disabled people and their families to navigate.
But Paula Tesoriero acknowledges the government's changes to pay and carer eligibility are a positive step, but it would be better if they could be implemented much sooner.
Families, disabled people and advocates have been pushing for these changes for a number of years. There has been work going on steadily in the last couple of years to get to this point.
And Paula Tesoriero hopes the necessary law changes will be pushed through before the end of this parliamentary term. Mō te hōtaka o te ahi, ko Sarah Robson, aho.
Prince Harry has spoken of his sadness and regret at a decision he says he had no other option but to make. The Duke and Duchess of Sussex have reached an agreement with the Queen over their wish to step back from royal duties. But instead of stepping back, the deal will see them step away from the royal family. They will no longer carry out official duties on behalf of the Queen or use their HRH titles. They'll also need to pay commercial rent for their home at Frogmore Cottage on the Queen's estate at Windsor. As the BBC's Nicholas Witchell reports, it's a decision which goes beyond what Prince Harry had intended.
They had hoped, they said in their personal statement of the 8th of January, to find a progressive new role within the royal family in which, while stepping back, they could have continued to serve. That hasn't worked out. Buckingham Palace has taken a hard line. Their royal role has been all but removed, and Harry is clearly disappointed. At a private dinner in London for Sentebale, his HIV charity in southern Africa, he said he wanted his audience to hear the truth. He recalled the aftermath of his and Meghan's wedding.
Once Meghan and I were married, we were excited, we were hopeful, and we were here to serve. For those reasons, it brings me great sadness that it has come to this.
He said the decision for him and his wife to step back is not one he'd made lightly.
What I want to make clear is we're not walking away, and we certainly aren't walking away from you. Our hope was to continue serving the Queen, the Commonwealth and my military associations, but without public funding. Unfortunately, that wasn't possible.
And he said he would continue to serve his country.
I will always have the utmost respect for my grandmother, my Commander-in-Chief, and I am incredibly grateful to her and the rest of my family for the support they have shown Meghan and I over the last few months. I will continue to be the same man who holds his country dear and dedicates his life to supporting the causes, charities and military communities that are so important to me.
All of which establishes beyond doubt that this process of stepping away from royal life and royal duty has already fallen short of Harry's hopes. He's taken responsibility for choosing this new path, and he says he's accepted the conditions which have been imposed by the Queen and her advisers.
And that's the BBC's Nicholas Witchell there. We're getting a lot of feedback on Harry and Meghan, and it's a mixed bag, I have to say. Sue says that she checks the UK media daily and they continually criticised Meghan in an awful way right from when she first appeared with Harry. And why does she have to make an amends with her father? No public know what's really gone on in her family, says Sue. Others say, I think there is a major fuss being made over Harry and Meghan. They should just disappear and become Harry and Meghan Windsor and learn to live on an income and by hard work like everybody else. They are just a couple of people making a fuss over nothing. Maureen has got in touch to say royalists should get real. The institution is unsustainable. They can still be royal but not leech the British people dry. Thanks for getting in touch, Maureen. And this one says, Meghan and Harry had the love and best wishes of millions at their wedding. The Queen and Charles could not have given them better support. Sadly, Meghan has taken Harry down a sad road. And this from John Robb, who is, well, by all accounts, begging us to stop playing Meghan and Harry stories. It's time for RNZ to drop the Harry and Meghan story. You're starting to sound like the UK gutter press. I'll pass that one on, John. Thanks for getting in touch. It is 16 minutes after, almost 17 minutes after 6, and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. A BBC investigation has seen documents that show how Africa's richest woman made her fortune through exploiting her own country and corruption. Isabel dos Santos is the daughter of the former Angolan president, Eduardo dos Santos. The documents show she got access to lucrative deals involving land, diamonds, oil and telecoms while her father was in power. Isabel dos Santos has denied any wrongdoing. The BBC's Richard Bilton reports.
Isabel dos Santos is a billionaire with a glamorous life. She is Africa's richest woman. She says she earned all her money through hard work. It's not true. A leak of more than 700,000 documents from her business empire was obtained by the Platform to Protect Whistleblowers in Africa and shared with the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists. They show much of her wealth is down to her father and some very dubious deals. Her dad is Eduardo dos Santos, who ruled Angola for 38 years. And there was a pattern. The president would issue an order or sign a decree. His daughter and her family would get a deal. They know about Isabel dos Santos here in the slums of Luanda. In Povoado de Carreo, 500 families live in cramped conditions by an open sewer. They were evicted from their village for a new development. Now their children play in the polluted water.
This is very upsetting. It is revolting. It smells, the water is filthy, and it is right next door to where these people were forced to live. And as the tide rises, the water just moves in to where people are living their lives. Imagine living here.
Our documents show Isabel dos Santos' company got involved in the development plans. It was then approved by her father, the president. The people of Povoado de Carreo were evicted from their homes. Fatima and her children now share a shack with 5 other families.
Mas se o governo ou alguém de boa fé,
if the government or someone in good faith who saw how we are living here or who would share with us, we would be very grateful, because our living here is not good. It's not at all acceptable.
That development didn't go ahead, but it's the same story over and over again. Presidential decrees earned Isabel dos Santos and her family contracts in land, telecoms, even diamonds. Fernando Macedo is an Angolan academic.
I think that she got the opportunity to become rich and take the opportunity that his father, by decree, would transfer state assets, state monies to her.
Take oil. Angola has vast resources. The state oil company, Sonangol, gave Isabel dos Santos a very good deal on a very valuable asset. She was able to buy a lucrative stake in a Portuguese energy company by paying only 15% up front. The rest turned into a loan from Sonangol. That deal made her €750 million. Tom Keatinge is director of the Centre for Financial Crime and Security Studies.
That's absolutely the definition of corruption. She was put in a favoured position because she was the daughter of the president.
It got worse. The president later made his daughter head of Sonangol. She says it was a sensible move.
It wasn't my father, it was the government, but anyway, we can go through that. I worked for them as a consultant. That then, after I finished my consultancy work, invited me and said, would I consider the position to become Sonangol's chairperson?
She says the deal with the energy company earned Sonangol money and denies all the BBC's allegations. Her lawyers say she's been involved in no wrongdoing, and it's a politically motivated witch hunt by the Angolan government. There is a criminal investigation in Angola. Rafael Marquez is an Angolan journalist.
The state was at the disposal of Isabel dos Santos, and she ruled supreme in grabbing whatever she wanted in this country.
Angola wants answers, and the documents are clear. Isabel dos Santos is the corrupt billionaire, and Africa's richest woman made her fortune exploiting her homeland.
The BBC's Richard Bilton reporting. Let's head back to Australia now, and while rain has brought some reprieve to residents who've had their homes threatened by bushfires, thousands of others have lost everything. Many of them face the difficult task of whether to rebuild their homes or move elsewhere. It's an issue experts and homeowners are wrestling with as they weigh up whether to rebuild in high-risk bushfire zones. The ABC's Loretta Florence reports.
11 years ago, Shane Harris and his family were enjoying life in northeast Victoria.
Yeah, it was wonderful. It was really beautiful, great location. I'm in the restaurant industry, so it's a really good food and wine culture and lots of tourism and lots of good people.
When the Black Saturday bushfires destroyed his home in Madjigonga, he planned to stay and rebuild his life there.
I thought, it had happened and probably sort of a once-in-a-lifetime event, but business was very quiet and we sort of started to get sort of a bit anxious about whether we would stay, so we decided not to rebuild.
After renting for 5 years, the family took an insurance payout and moved to Melbourne.
The property was on the market for a very long time. Most people knew they had to build with the new fire regulations, so that was a bit prohibitive for a lot of people, I think.
A royal commission into the Victorian fires handed down 67 recommendations. One of them was a buyback scheme, allowing those in high-risk areas to sell their homes to the state so they could resettle out of harm's way. It was a voluntary scheme and a controversial one, with only some homeowners eligible for the payout. But it's an idea backed by Melbourne University bushfire scientist Kevin Tolhurst, who wants all of the states to adopt a buyback scheme.
There's a massive legacy there of people living in indefensible locations. So we need to recognise that there were some mistakes made from a planning point of view.
And he says that unlike the Victorian model, any new buyback scheme should be compulsory, with those in very high-risk areas prohibited from rebuilding.
We're making decisions that we know are potentially going to have damaging effects down the line in perhaps 10, 20, 30 years' time.
But Kate Cotter from the Bushfire Building Council of Australia says a buyback scheme is expensive and impractical. She estimates 1 million properties are in dangerous zones and that the money would be better spent upgrading older homes.
Less than 10% of houses in high-risk areas are bushfire resilient. We really have an entire building stock in this country that isn't resilient enough for today's bushfires, let alone what we're going to face in the future. So we really need to find ways to help people retrofit, put in safety systems that will help protect older properties.
Former Madjigonga resident Shane Harris left for good. It's a decision he doesn't regret.
It definitely could not go back to a high danger area at all. I couldn't go through that every summer, just wondering where your life's going to be. Waking up one day and everything's just turned around again.
That's Melbourne resident Shane Harris talking to the ABC's Loretta Florence. Meanwhile, New Zealand firefighters who went over to Australia to help with the bushfire effort have begun returning home. Our reporter Mackenzie Smith is at the airport in Auckland and joins me now. Mackenzie, what sort of stories have been emerging from the firefighters' deployment?
Hi, Lisa. So, there've been a group of 21 over there, part of several deployments. Over 200 firefighters have now gone from New Zealand to Australia since October, and it's been a mixed story. This particular group didn't see too much action. The few I spoke with just earlier were saying there were 2 days where they were close to quite an intense fire near Canberra, but they were it was cordoned off, and they were really just managing that cordon. So nothing too severe, and they all said they were keen to give it another crack at the next opportunity.
So you've been speaking to some of the firefighters coming home? Yeah,
that's right. And they've just been over there for a few days. 5 days on and then a day off and then another 5 days on. One in particular, Kenneth, who's a volunteer firefighter, he was actually saying that there's lessons to be learned. Quite a few of these firefighters, I think, are taking back experience that they can use here in New Zealand. Kenneth thinks that we could be using some different techniques.
We learned a lot this deployment because the fire behaviour is so different to what it normally is. Things are happening that the locals aren't expecting, and we're the same, so we're following their lead pretty much. So it was exciting and hard work, but and we've learned a lot to take back home, and if we decide to come back, or if we can come back, we'll use that knowledge again. So yeah.
Yeah. What kind of knowledge do you think could be applied in a New Zealand context?
They tend to do a lot more backburning than what we'll ever do, but for the size of the fire, that's quite natural over in Australia. So yeah, it's a strategy we can probably use more in major size fires. So it's something there. It's another tool in the box we can use. Yeah.
Yeah. So you think backburning could be an effective tool of limiting fire risk in New Zealand?
Yeah. That's not for me to say, but it looks like it's a useful tool.
And that was one of the firefighters returning from helping out with the bushfires in Australia. Our reporter Mackenzie Smith was out at the airport as some of them headed home. Let's get to some of your feedback before we finish up for the evening. A lot of you have been getting in touch about, well, a number of things on the programme. Let's get to Vodafone, who's letting its workers finish at 2:00 on a Friday, so knock off early. And this is over the so-called summer months, and it's about 6 weeks left to run on it. This person, Bill, has got in touch to say for many years, Sanitarium has let its staff go home around 1 p.m. on a Friday. Sounds brilliant. It was a great way to start the weekend, says Bill. And Raywin in Wellington has texted saying, there's nothing new about Vodafone's idea. I recall that in the 1960s, Friday was known as Poets' Day. Push off early. Tomorrow is Saturday. And this one in from Claudia McDonald, who is from MD Mango, which is part of the DDB group. Thanks for getting in touch, Claudia. Claudia says, great initiative from Vodafone. The DDB group has had summer hours in place for 4 years. People can leave after 1 p.m. on a Friday from December to the end of February if their work is done and their team is okay. People, she says, need to be available on the phone, but it has worked extremely well as a way to attract the best people, retain the good ones, and continue to deliver to our clients. She says that the 4 companies within the group have never been in better shape. It treats staff as responsible adults. And this industry, she said, is known for long hours and high stress, and this has helped redress the balance. So instead of long lunches on a Friday, Claudia says, we have long weekends. And some of you getting in contact about house affordability. Peter says the reason they're more expensive is they are much bigger now, full of things that they didn't have in them before: double garages, 2 bathrooms, double glazing and insulation. It's not just simple inflation, Peter says. Hey, thanks for joining us for our first show of 2020. Back tomorrow.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. Fire and Emergency is encouraging people not to dismiss emergency sirens, despite a false alarm that triggered fears of a tsunami in the Bay of Plenty last night. South Korea has confirmed its first case of the respiratory virus that's infected hundreds in the central Chinese city of Wuhan. Disability advocates say an overhaul of funded family care has failed to fix some of the most critical problems. And the Nurses Union has complained to the Canterbury DHB about a 6-week delay in paying up to 1,500 nurses for their extra work over Christmas and New Year. Those are the headlines. Our next news will be at 7:00. Everyone has a life story.
It's not a normal working day, it's a normal night for me because I come out under cover of darkness.
Where we fit in.
Any beach, anywhere, anytime.
The work we do.
It's the hours really, because I don't really have a social life. At least it stops me getting into trouble.